deal any longer with all the different regulations, including rent control, that DC imposes on them. And every time that happens, somebody sells one of those little buildings, which just because it was a building with a laundry room, or it didn't have central air, or it only had one bathroom and a two-bedroom apartment. Every time someone sells one of those little buildings that, because it didn't have all the amenities, would have rented at a more moderate rent to a kind of developer, and in certain parts of the city, it's torn down and they build $500,000, $1 million lofts. Here in Brookland, they probably just refurbish it and sell them off as somewhat less expensive condos. Every time that happens, some rental housing disappears, and it's mainly moderate income rental housing that disappears. Sometimes those buildings are even sold to people who don't build condos. They tear them down, they build a much larger, taller, glossier, fancier apartment building, but because it's brand new, all the rents are reset to the current market rate. So that's also happening. So I think we need to get rid of regulations that are driving out small landlords who own the less expensive small multi-units. I actually run into them sometimes, and they actually just say, I don't want to buy a building in DC, I only want to buy one in Maryland and Virginia. And these are not super wealthy people. These are people who could afford to buy like a 4-unit building.
And that would help preserve more moderately priced rentals.
It might not even help preserve it. I mean, it might even expand. The other problem we have in D.C., of course, and I think I'm the only candidate who's actually against this, is the height limit. And the height limit is partly... the whole D.C. political class seems to be against the height limit. For some reason, it would be terrifying if across the river from Arlington, where there are 50-story buildings, someone built a 50-story building in D.C., or across the Eastern Avenue from Silver Spring, where there are 50-story buildings, somebody built a 50-story building in D.C. Somehow that's terrifying. And our whole political class, and I think all the other mayoral candidates, are against that. It's also true that Congress is against it. And so Congress would have to give us the right to at least debate that internally before we could actually legalize building tall buildings. But right now, you have all these people moving into D.C. who make between $75,000 and $150,000 a year, lots of them. But you can't build a building over 10 stories tall. I live in Ward 2. In Ward 2, slowly, every old building, every parking lot is being replaced with a building that is exactly 10 stories tall. Eventually, I think D.C. is going to sort of look like something from Star Wars, that you would fly over between the ravines, between buildings. The whole thing is going to be exactly 10 stories tall. We're also all going to be priced out of it. But even